today, and I titled it "To Purge or Not to Purge." That is a question for a reason, because a lot of us don't realize that the Sage product is gathering data for us every single day. And we have many of us who have had the program for years and years and years. So our history files are getting very, very, very large. Now, people have asked me over the years, if I have a lot of history, is that going to slow my system down? Well, the answer to that is, typically no. I mean, for your daily processing, where you're posting your entries and so forth, that's not going to slow it down. But where you're going to see slowness is probably in reporting. Or when you're doing queries and you're trying to pull data up, because you could end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of records out there. So the first thing that I tell people is, we really don't want to so-called purge data. We want to archive data. So now everybody's eyes just lit up and said, oh my gosh, does Sage have an archive function? And the answer to that is no, it really does not. So what I like to do is I like to create an archive company. So anytime that I'm going to make the decision to, remove some of my history files, what I will do is I will make an archive company. So I'm going to. That's actually normally a bonus round piece for me, but today we're actually going to start there. So how do you make an archive company? Well, what you do is you come here to Library Master and you click on Main, and then you go to Company Maintenance. Now, I usually choose the letter Z to start with because that puts it at the bottom of my company listing, so I don't have to see it every single time that I'm pulling it up. But I will put in the letter, and then maybe well, I'm going to choose 16 on this. Maybe the year that I'm doing this. And what I will say is I will say copy of DOM, that's my company code, as of, and then I will put a specific date, of when I made this copy. Now you can fill in the address information, but that's not necessary. But then you're going to click the copy button. It's going to give you a warning telling you that you have to, if you have anything integrated, you want to be careful of that. We're just going to go ahead and click OK. And then, of course, do you want to save this company? Well, yes, we want to save it. So we're going to say yes here. And then you put in the company that you want to copy from. Source company is the company you are copying from. I usually choose all modules. Now, be careful because of the fact that, we want to make sure that you have enough room on your server drives in order to make these copy companies. Some of us have very large company data sets. Now, in today's time, a lot of us have very large servers now too, so that's not necessarily an issue, but you want to keep that in mind whenever you're making a copy company. And then your next thing that you do is you just click on Proceed, and it will copy the data for all your companies. So I'm going to cancel out of this, but normally you would hit Proceed, but that's going to give you, as of this date, all those history files that, data, some of which we are going to purge. So you were never really going to lose that data. Now, the other thing that I'm going to tell you is when you go to do these purges, so to speak, you want people out of the system because we are affecting files that they could be posting to. So you want to do this when people are out of the system. So number one, make that copy company. Number two, make a backup. Okay, very, very important. Make a backup of your data, because why? What can happen? Sometimes we have damaged data out in our files and we don't even realize it. So when we go to purge it, sometimes things, it may get hung up, or we may end up with an error message or whatever. We always want to make a backup copy, not within Sage, but outside of the software before we do any type of purging. Or maybe I go purge and I get really, woo, and I put the wrong date in and I've accidentally purged everything. So we want to be able to have something to copy back from and make sure that we never, ever, ever fly without our net. You know how I feel about that. So we're going to get started on how to do the purging now. Now, I'm going to start with inventory, purchase order, and sales order. Now, those of you who don't have those modules, you can get, you can kind of hang tight for a few minutes because I am going to get to your modules. But these three modules actually, gather a lot of data. especially the inventory module, because inventory gets data from, purchase order, sales order, and inventory itself. So there's a lot of transactions that go into this product. So I'm going to click on the inventory, and you say, well, where, what history are you talking about, Sue? Where exactly are these transactions? Well, I've actually purged my transactions out of this company, so I'm going to go to another company, and I want to show you a little trick. This will be helpful when you have your archive company. If you right-click on a menu option, I can actually go and say Open in a secondary company. So I'm going to go down to my archive company here, and I'm going to open that report up in my ZZZ company. Now, keep in mind, I have not left DOM, but that's a way that you can get, in between the two companies. That's a fine, wonderful little trick. Now, this detail report here, I'm going to print it by date rather than period, and I'm going to go back to 2019. So I'm going to print, well, keep in mind, my data is in a future period, okay? So I'm back in 2019 through today, so to speak, and this is what I'm talking about as far as history goes in inventory. You'll notice here that I have all these 2019 transactions. Now, in your cases, you may go in there and you may say all periods or go back as far as you can, and you will find out that you may have data back from the 90s, for those of you who have been on this system a very long time. Because transaction history is turned on now by default. In the old days, we used to have a check mark, but it's now turned on by default so that we can run our inventory valuation report by period. We need that transaction history out there, but you can end up with a lot of history. So, what do we do about that? How do we get rid of it? Or actually, where else can I see that other than just in reports? So what you can do also is if you pull up an item, let's go ahead and select that, and I go to transactions here. What I wanted to point out here is that you'll notice that it'll print out or just the current month. You say, what do you mean? Well, I know I'm in this month, but it's displaying something else. Well, it goes back to your inventory setup, and it looks at the current period in there, and that is what it's going to display. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my binoculars, and I'm going to choose all. So from the item itself, I can also see those, old transactions in here too. Oh, you know what? Look, I'm in DOM. Let me go back. I'm going to do my little trick again, and we're going to go to ZZZ, and I want to show you that item one more time. And we'll do the exact same thing, and we'll say all. And there are all my 2019 transactions. It can get cumbersome, especially if you're writing reports off of that. So keep that in mind, that how much of that transaction history do I want out there? Okay, so I showed you where to find it. Now how do I get rid of it, right? So where it is under utilities here. And what you have to click on is Purge Item History. Now, purging for most of us, makes our heart beat fast. And it makes mine too. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to lie. That's why we make our backups. That's why we make our copies. But here it's going to ask you if you want, what date do you want to, purge history on or, for. Now, if I put in 2019 here, it's going to tell me the purge cannot be the current or prior year. So the system is actually forcing you to keep 2 years of inventory transaction history. Great, that works for me. So I can go to the prior year, or maybe I want to go a few years back. Let's say maybe I want to keep 7 years of history. 7 seems to be the magic number quite often for a lot of the accounting folks. So, I can say 7 years back, and that's what I want. Now, keep in mind that 7 years would probably include the current year. So you might want to think about that. So when you go ahead and say proceed here, it'll say, hey, do you want to remove item history dated on or before 2018? And then in this case, you're going to go ahead and say yes. Now, I'm going to say no because I've actually purged the history myself. But now, if I go back into that item, and you actually got a preview of that a little bit ago, but if I go back to that item, you're going to notice when I choose all, Remember, we saw all those 2019 before. Now I have an entry that says detail purged. So it goes away, but it collapses it into a one-line item. In this case, all those transaction entries, the value came down to a -1 penny, but we have to have that in order to keep the inventory transactions in balance and keep our valuation reports working properly. But that's what happens when you do the purge in inventory, okay? Now, let's run off to purchase order. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm doing the happy dance as far as purchase order is concerned, because as of the 2015 version, Sage put in a great feature that we have been wanting for years and years and years. Those of you who have the sales order module know this feature in the sales order, but what it is they now are allowing you to retain purchase order history. Now those, my purchasing guys right now are just, pumping fists and going, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Because before, what happened is when the PO was completed and you did period end, based on the number of days that you're telling the system to retain completed purchase orders, the PO would pop off. So a lot of our PO guys really, really hated that because they wanted to be able to go back and look at old purchase orders. So if you go to purchase order options, you have to be in the 2015 version or higher, and you go to the history tab. What you're going to see here is a new field. It says retain purchase order history. You want to make sure that is checked on. And then I like to say prompt as far as deleted orders or deleted lines, okay? When you do the conversion from the version that you're on to the current version, to the 2015 or 2016, during the conversion, the system will prompt us, do you want to create this history? Our answer, in my opinion, is going to be yes. Yes, I do. If someone has converted you and they accidentally said no, don't worry about it. There's still a way to create that history file. So where is that history? Well, if you go to the inquiry screen under purchase orders, now we have this new purchase order history inquiry. This is a new one. We click on the magnifying glass and voila, there are our purchase orders. And so let's say I select a purchase order. I can see exactly how it was put in the system originally, okay? And I can click on my receipts button, and my receipts button will show me both my, this is my receipt of goods. How do I know? It's got a G here, and I have no invoice number, so that's my receipt of goods. And it'll show me my receipt of invoice, which has an I there, and our invoice number and invoice date. So this history file is really, really super awesome, guys. I mean, just super awesome. So what does that allow us to do? Well, what it allows us to do is come over here to purchase order options and number of days to retain completed purchase orders. A lot of us have that for 999 days. And what also happens is because the POs were getting purged when people were doing period end, I have a lot of people that are not closing the period and purchase order because they didn't want those to disappear. Well, now you can make your date smaller, 120 days, 90 days, whatever's good for you, and you can start closing the PO module as we would love for you to properly do. And they will no longer, pop off the system. This will also help when you reconcile your purchases clearing account, okay? So you've got to keep that in mind too. So once we have that history out there, how do we purge this data? Well, what you do is you come here to utility. Now, what data am I talking about? Let's just take a step back. The data that I'm talking about is in purchase order entry when we click the magnifying glass and we have, remember, we've been keeping those for 999 days and never closing our purchase order module. So now I have 6,000 purchase orders out there. I obviously don't, but let me tell you, I've seen a lot of clients that have. And oh my gosh, they're just so hard to manage. So now I have it in the history file. How do I get it out? Okay, we go to utilities and we click on Purge Obsolete Purchase Orders. Okay. Then you put in the date. Well, what do you want it purged as of? What date? Now, for most of my purchasing people, keep in mind, it's not going to purge open POs. It's not going to purge POs on back order. It's only going to purge the completed POs. So, maybe you just want 6 months worth, okay? So you might want to do something like that, as of that, particular date. Once you hit proceed, it's going to say, do you want to remove obsolete purchase orders dated on or before 9/30/15? And then you can say yes. Then it will ask you for a cancellation code, and these are the codes that come with the system. You can put in your own cancellation codes, which are under the setup menu, which you can add. But I'm just going to do an obsolete here, and you would click then OK. All right. Now, I mentioned the purchases clearing account. Remember, that's just like your accounts payable account. Purchases clearing is a reconcilable account. We have people all the time to say to us, hey, how do I reconcile purchases clearing? Because I have all these where I don't have quantity. I ordered 10, I received 9, I was invoiced for 10. How do I fix this? And you have to, if you don't use this purge obsolete purchase orders, you have to go through and you have to either receive the difference or you have to receive what invoiced for the difference. So being able to purge the obsolete purchase orders is a great thing to be able to do, because then it quickly gets rid of those old POs that we no longer need to maintain. Okay? Now, let's go on to sales orders. Same thing, almost identical. Sales order options, and some of us don't even realize this is out here. You click on your history tab, and once again, just like PO, retain sales order quote history. Turn it on. I like to do the prompts. Where is it located? Same place, under inquiries, sales order and quote history inquiry. And it will maintain all of these old orders that you have out here. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this. This was my sales order as I originally entered it. And if I click on my invoices tab, these are my 2 invoices. I can double click on that and drill down to my invoice history, drill down to invoice history. We'll talk about that one in a second. And these are the 2 invoices that were posted against the sales order. So that's really cool. A lot of us don't realize that, because remember, once you invoice a sales order, where does it disappear from? It disappears from sales order entry after you close the month. Okay, so once it's completed, you close the month, it'll come out of here. However, because of the fact that we have that history option on, we have it in here. But once again, this history can become unmanageable. I have personally gone into clients where I look at the sales order quote history, and there's 60, 70,000 orders out there. And it's like, whoa, okay. So if we have to write reports off of it or whatever, it can really be, cumbersome at times, or if you're trying to look something up. So how do I purge that history? Well, once again, utilities, which, guys, I'm really glad that actually Sage put these utilities into a separate menu item, because years ago they were part of the period end menu item. And believe it or not, sometimes people would get confused and they thought it was part of the period end process. So we actually had people that were purging and didn't realize that you don't do that. That's not part of the period end process. So it was fantastic that they moved these to their own menu so that people don't get confused. So how do I get rid of that old sales order and quote history? Click right here, Purge Order and Quote History. Once again, it's going to ask you for a date, so you have to decide how much of that old history do I want. Now, a little different than POs. Maybe what I want to do is keep maybe a year's worth or so, maybe 2 years, I don't know, maybe 7. So you just put in the date that you want to keep it as of and hit proceed. And you go ahead and say yes, and then that will remove that history for you. Okay? All right, now let's fly over to accounts payable. Now people say, accounts payable can keep history? Sure it can. So let's go to Accounts Payable Options, and we go to the History tab. And right here we have Track Detailed Invoice and Payment History. Retain comment lines for invoices. You know, I like to keep both of those turned on, but this is the main thing right here, Track Detailed Invoice and Payment History. So where do we see that history? Well, actually, if we go over to the main tab here and we click on the Invoice History Inquiry, the system is going to keep track of all of our invoices and adjustments or anything that, you know, we've done with that particular invoice. Now, you know, I can, you know, double click on any one of these and drill down on it, you know, go to my lines tab and see how it was posted and see what GL account number it was posted to. I can go to the payment history. And I have two buttons here with the payment history. Right now, my default bank code is D, so if I click this magnifying glass, it'll show me just the checks that were for D. Or if I click the flashlight, if I have multiple bank codes, it's going to show me everything for every bank code, which is kind of nice, you know, especially if you change bank codes, you know, partway through a year or maybe a couple of years ago. So that's where that history is. Now, you know, where else is that AP history? You know, it's also in your vendors. So if you go to vendor maintenance, and let's pick on our good old Airway properties, and I go to the invoice tab here. Here is one of my invoices. Okay. Now, one of the things that I want you to keep in mind when you see this invoice here, and you see the payment down here, on this invoices screen, there's a setup option, you know, for accounts payable that tells the system how long to retain these invoices on this screen. So I'm going to jump over there real quick. I'm going to go into accounts payable options. It's going to tell me I'm in, and then I can be only, you know, can only be viewed. So I'm going to click OK. And right here on my additional tab, you notice I have 999 days. So this is my days to retained paid invoices. Not the same as what we have here on our invoice history. Two different files, okay? So 999 days, my invoices will stay on this screen until, you know, I close my period end. It calculates, hey, is it over 999 days? If it is, it's going to drop off the screen. If I double click on one of these items here, you'll notice that what it does is it pulls up my invoice history inquiry. So once again, this is that history I was talking about, different file. This is the history that we are going to want to purge if it gets too big. So how do we do that? Go to the Utilities menu. We go to Purge Accounts Payable History. And right here, I can tell it to remove invoice payment history dated on or before. So, you know, maybe I want to keep, you know, the last 7 years. So, you know, maybe I'll say 12/31 of, you know, 2009, for instance. And if I hit proceed, it'll tell me that it's going to remove invoice or payment history dated on or before this date. So you can go ahead and say yes to that, and it'll purge that history. Now, will those invoices still be in that vendor that I saw? Yes. Will my, you know, drill down be there? Depends on how far, you know, how close up that you purged. So you got to be careful on what you're purging. Okay. Now, let's look at accounts receivable, and we have the exact same situation set up. We're going to go to accounts receivable options, and I'm going to go to the, let's see, what tab are we on? The history tab. And right here, cash receipt history, number of years to retain cash receipt history. I don't know why I put it out to 99. I kind of like to think 99 out there. And then, you know, I want to retain for, you know, all my transactions. And the same thing here with my invoice history. Yeah, I want to retain my detail. Notice that there's not a by date there, but I'm retaining all of my detail. So just like we saw in accounts payable, that's going to hold our history. So where is it? Well, a couple places. So let's go to accounts receivable, and we go to invoice history inquiry. Now, I can click on my magnifying glass here, and it'll show me every invoice that I ever created. I have gone in here on clients and had over 100,000, 200,000 invoices that they've just never purged. And sometimes when you come in here and you click on that magnifying glass, you sit and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait, because it has to go through the entire file to get down to here to the bottom and to tell me how many records it found. So sometimes we do retain too much history in here, and this is actually one of the ones that people probably purge the most. But this is our accounts receivable history file, which is different than what we see in the customer. So let's go ahead and pull the customer up. We're going to go to ABS, and once again, I'm going to click on that Invoices tab. And remember, we saw here all the, the invoices. That is the same as accounts payable. How many days in the setup options of accounts receivable to keep your, paid invoices do you want? Now, personally, here, I would normally set that to 999 days, because I like in my customer to be able to see, a couple years worth. But that is an option. Now, where else can I see that invoice history that we were looking at? If I click my More button, I can also see it right from here. So I don't have to go out to the menu and drill down on invoice history. I can do it right from the customer itself, and here are those invoices that I was looking at out there just for the particular customer, instead of showing every single one that I had ever done. Now, payment history. A lot of us like to use the transaction tab. Those of us that came from the old DOS program we kind of like this, and whenever I get on, I kind of like this because I like the split screen. But if I just wanted to say, for instance, maybe I just wanted to see payments. If I hit the binoculars here, I can click and just choose payments, and it'll show me all of my payments. That's my cash receipt history there. So where else can I see this information? I can also see it from my reports menu. A lot of times we lose those cash receipts journals. So what do? Well, I come into a cash receipt report, and I can run it by a particular date. That's usually more helpful than the period. And I can put in the date of the receipt journal that I'm missing, so I can see how things were actually posted. Also, the accounts receivable invoice history report, this is pretty cool too. You can run it by customer, and you can give it all dates, and you can see all the invoices that this customer has ever had with you. So that's a nice, cool report to be able to do. So I've decided I've gone into my invoice history inquiry. I see that I have 60,000 invoices out there. I think it's a little bit much. How do I get rid of it? Once again, we go to the Utilities menu, and we're going to come in here, and we are going to choose Purge Accounts Receivable History. So what am I going to do? Well, I can purge my invoice history as of a specific date. So once again, I can say 12/31 of 10. Do I want to remove my deposit history also? As of what date? And then you hit proceed. Okay? So then they will be out of the those inquiry screens, okay? And it tells you here that you are removing invoice history dated on or before this particular date, deposit history dated on or before this particular date. Now, the next question that people will ask me is there an undo? No, and that's why we made that backup copy. Because if you accidentally purge through, let's say, today, you've now purged out that history. So That's why I want you to make the backup company copy. I want you to make an outside, copy, so that, if you make a mistake, then you will have something to go back to easily, and not have to break out in cold sweats thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? And it does happen. So also, whenever you're doing any of these purges, as I stated when we started, have all the users out of the system. Do it after hours. Do it where you're not being disrupted. Another question people will say to me, well, how long does it take? Well, in some cases, it just takes seconds. It takes seconds to change your whole world when you purge sometimes. Depending on how much history you have, it could take a few minutes, but it normally does not take hours and hours to do, but it can take a few minutes. So, a lot for that. And that's pretty much it. So you have to determine, what is working for you. If keeping all your history out there is fine, fine. If you're running reports and it's chugging through, because remember, whenever you run a report and it used any of these history files, it has to go through the entire history file in order to find the data that you are looking for. So, that may be why it's chugging through and taking so long to run. Sometimes, people will do the opposite. They're like, well, I want to keep it in my live company, but these are all historical reports that I want to run. So I'll create a copy company purge out of there and run these historical reports out of there. So it's optional. So, basically this was our spring cleaning. If you have any questions on, should I, how do I, please feel free to give us a call. I kept us down to our 30-minute time frame today. So, and I noticed that we don't have any questions typed over here, so I think everybody's doing well. But if you have any issues, questions, problems about that, please give us a call. We are always looking for subject matter for our next Tech Tuesday, so feel free to email us that. And everybody have a great day. Appreciate you coming. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.